Thank you very much for being on the programme today. Donald Trump is obviously one of the most unpredictable of presidents. Do you think he could be serious about a potential strike against Iran?
So I do. I absolutely do, and I think we should also take that very seriously because of the extent to which Israel has clearly degraded Iran's nuclear and ballistic capabilities, which, by the way, Sophie, we know that those capabilities are a threat, obviously, to the Middle East, stability in the Middle East, but also to Europe and to us. And I think we have to look at this in an incredibly serious way. What Israel is doing is something that no one anticipated. The British government had no advance notice of this. But America, let's just talk about America. They were the ones that brought Iran to the table for talks. Those talks broke down. But during those talks, it was discovered that they were continuing to increase their level of enrichment of uranium. There was no good faith around actually cutting that back. And even the IAEA reports last week showed that. So I think we have to be very mindful that this was always a precarious situation because Iran has stated again and again and again their objective was to wipe Israel out, the only Jewish state. And clearly that is not acceptable.
So just to be clear, you say that there is a possibility, you think, that Donald Trump could strike against Iran, and you think, from what you're saying, that that would be justified if he chose to do that?
Well, first of all, that is obviously for America, but we shouldn't rule out this possibility whatsoever because America has always been crystal clear. President Trump has been crystal clear about Iran, the threat that Iran poses, and he wanted to have the talks to come to good fruition, which clearly was not going to happen. It was clear that that wasn't going to happen through the level of enrichment that was taking place.
So if the US does strike against Iran, and look, I know that this is an uncertain situation, but we do have to think through different eventualities at this stage. Should the UK provide military support for that intervention?
Well, I think, first of all, the British government will not, and rightly so, give any commentary on this because they would have to, they'll be working through plenty of scenarios. I think I've heard that from the government already, and that's right and proper. What I'm interested in is what the government will do in terms of keeping Britain safe, British nationals, both here at home but also in the region, because we have thousands upon thousands, tens upon thousands of Brits in the Middle East region. So a responsible government, which, this government will be working through all of that. I can't speculate on what type of involvement Britain would have, but the reality is that they should be doing everything right now in terms of planning. And by the way, they should also have a plan to evacuate British nationals in Israel. And of course, this is an area where we've not heard much from the government. And I know many MPs have been contacted by relatives, concerned people, loved ones about their family members in Israel. I actually received some calls today on behalf of one family whose daughter is stuck in Israel, and they obviously want to bring her home, but they don't know how to do that. So there are a number of issues here, and I personally think right now that has to be the priority of the government, to get British nationals out of Israel and also to work with the government of Israel to do that, while obviously working through wider implications, because we have a lot of equities, their security and military equities in the Middle East.
One of the other eventualities or possibilities could be the US using the base at Diego Garcia, the Chagos base that's jointly owned. If the US does request permission to fire against Iran from that base, is that something that the UK government should give?
Well, we don't know what the plans of the United States is. That base is pivotal. Obviously, they've had bombers situated there. I don't know if that is still the case right now. It is clear that the government will have to step up. That becomes operational. I don't want to speculate about that. That is operational. But clearly, both governments would have to work through that in terms of what it means operationally, and as I've said also, what it means for protecting British interests in the region too.
You make your feelings very clear when it comes to Iran's actions, and particularly when it comes to potential nuclear enrichment. I guess the question that I have is, if a regime change in Iran was brought about by the US and Israel, do you think that would actually make the world a safer place? Because clearly there would be some real consequences to that in the Middle East.
Well, I think everyone has to reflect on Iran as it is today. an Iran that fuels proxies that effectively, whether it's Hamas, Hezbollah or the Houthis, but also an Iran that actually supplies weapons to Russia to use in Ukraine. That is the Iran of today that we are speaking about, and that is in nobody's interest. So at the end of the day...
But Western intervention in this region has not got a good track record.
Well, it hasn't.
You affect that.
Of course, well, I recognise that. Of course, I understand and recognise that. That is not what we're speaking about. Let's be very clear. Israel's were crystal clear on the 13th of June, last Friday, that their objective was to absolutely degrade the military and nuclear capability. Those ballistic missiles, we know the range of those missiles. They would affect and attack Europe. So this is about our safety and security as it is just as much as Israel's.
And just finally, would you be happy if the government acted before consulting Parliament on these things?
Well, I believe in making sure that our country is safe. And quite frankly, I think the government needs to do absolutely everything within its powers, based on intelligence, to keep Britain safe and also to keep British nationals safe, and that's at home as well as in the region. So, I think, quite frankly, as an opposition spokesperson, I would expect to be, we have ways of speaking and engaging and having those discussions. I think it's important, and I would expect that we would have some kind of dialogue around such significant issues of national security.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.